All right, folks, in TV land, we've had people here request additional sermons, expositions regarding the Kairouts that have just been read. And Kairout said, talk is the surface sweat of most men's thinking. What can you say about that? Ask yourselves at home, turn to one another. No offense, every time I start to address TV audience, I always want to say something like, turn to one another if you're sober enough or that you can talk comprehensively, because I try to think, are they actually sober, sane people sitting home watching television? Talk is the surface sweat of most men's thinking. Sure would be easy to turn that into, if you're an ordinary person, into an imagined attack upon how people ordinarily talk or how people ordinarily think. But if you could see far beyond ordinary philosophical, even psychological, or even nowadays neurological ideas of what human thought is, you would see that what comes out, what men talk about, just by and large, all the way through the spectrum of social conversation into areas of scientific expertise, is really just an infinitesimal amount away from the source of it. There is old ideas, since I see how clear that is to you people, old ideas that you used to hear people say, don't say the first thing that comes to your mind. That it's a sign of ill breeding or it can get you in trouble. It's just a good policy is, hesitate. Don't just say the first thing that comes to your mind. That, now I think some of you are getting, that was a sort of a crude social, but just sort of a non-essential reflection of what I'm talking about. Yeah, I guess it would be good practice for someone trying to be a bit more sophisticated. But the fact is, what men normally say, now it does not belie the fact when I say it all the way from social conversation to the expertise descriptions of a man of science. If a man is trying to describe his field, particle physics, or another guy just stood up and he's trying to describe a painting he just put on the wall, or somebody else just stands up trying to give a treasurer's report for the Alabama Possum Convention, then you would say, well, the scientist talking about particle physics certainly had more planning, is more training in his background than he is the treasurer, which nobody wanted the job to start with, or the Arkansas Possum Association. And that's true, we're not denying that. But yet in both cases, everything being relative, in both cases what they say is just surface sweat. It's just that the scientist had more preparation to get up, and he may have a few notes and stuff, but if he's really a scientist and apparently is familiar with his territory, intellectual territory, he's not going to have to stand there and read everything. In a sense, he's already got it just bubbling right below the surface. Might I suggest, on the basis of that, the only reason that Kairout or anyone would bring it up would be at least a tacit suggestion that there's an alternative. An alternative would be that whatever you say would be at least the distance between, perhaps Kairout had it wrong before, at least between, let us say, Albuquerque and perhaps even Flagstaff, maybe even to another state. That if you were not simply letting the surface sweat of what you normally think become your talk, then whatever it is you do say, I'm just guessing, might be very far removed from anything you're thinking. Of course, if you're ordinary and watching TV, you say, well, if you could do that, so what? What would it prove? Good. Nothing. Nothing. That's why you watch this show. The MCs dress nice because we have such schlocky prizes. Plus, we don't even have a door number 3. We can't even afford a door number 2. The only thing we got that passes is door number 1. Sometimes when the camera gets away from this backdrop, is to see the dumpster over there. And Kyrut said, the postmark on everybody's really important mail is all the same. Sitting out there in the park in the audience, when I first heard this, I noticed that some of you reacted vocally. Started to say violently, but I don't know why. I didn't start to say that. I started to say vocally and thought violently. The postmark on everybody's really important mail is all the same. I guess we could leave it there if we were some sort of ordinary would-be purveyors of non sequiturs. But I would suggest that it is the addendum, the ever-popular, always non-fattening, no cholesterol addendums here that I say make it. Because the addendum says, P.S., nobody wants to know about it. That is, nobody wants to know that you're a really important mail. Everybody's always has the same postmark. You do get it, don't you? It could have been cruder and say they all have the same return address. But we're trying to be sort of fancy, see? A little more subtle for all you possum farmers. The postmark on everybody's really important mail is all the same. And P.S., nobody wants to know about it. But P.P.S., especially not those who say and pray they do. I further suggest that the second addendum is double dirty. It wouldn't have been so bad if it said P.P.S., especially those who say they want to know. But to throw in those who say and pray they do. Because those who believe they're religious, what is it they're always claiming? Now, we'll get to science in a minute because science is saying the same thing. They're looking for the Big Bang instead of, who posed for this beautiful painting of God himself here on this black velvet. They say they want to know, and they pray they do, but they do not. Because why they do not is, you got to go back to the top, is that the postmark on everybody's really important mail is all the same. You followed that, didn't you? How would you like to be a full-fledged, card-carrying, God-fearing, decent Muslim and trace back all the important messages and find out that they came from the same place, that the messages from Jehovah, from Buddha, from Socrates, from soupy sales. What if you found they all, anything that you considered important, they all had the same postmark, and you had spent your whole life saying, I'm going to track it down? Or what if a scientist, we can make it even sound worse if you are of a more urbane persuasion than religious. How about a man who spends 15, 20 years, several graduate schools, then works his way up through all kinds of think tanks, MITs and Southern Cals, trying to track down the nature of the universe, more and more creates his own new niche down in the world of subatomic physics, and gets down there and finds out the Big Bang, just for instance, I'll just make it up, turned out to actually be God. And it was like the story in Genesis. Whatever it is, think about that you went through all of that, and you find out that the postmark on everything really important is all the same. There would be no hobbies. There is a Kyrut in here. It was a triumvirate, whether you realize that they were staggered about, but one guy said that trying to wrap up his view of all the ideas of plots and intrigues, he says, hell, me being alive is a conspiracy. But then somebody else, I may have separated him, or Kyrut did too much for you to catch it, but right after that, a guy wanted to counter it and say, well, being alive may be, he was saying, being alive, may be a great conspiracy. He's saying being alive may be man's great hobby. And then the first guy came back and said, wait a minute. He wanted to really put a rifle on it, and he said, all right, men being alive and thinking that they have secondary hobbies and interests, that, he corrected himself somewhat, that may be the grandest conspiracy. The grandest conspiracy could be, I didn't lose you, did I? Don't answer. The grandest conspiracy could be, and forget that the example I made up, that a particle physicist, a man, the leading expert in this field, and a card-carrying atheist, gets down and finds out that the unified field, the unified theory, turns out to be Jesus Christ. I didn't mean that. That was, that's him saying Jesus Christ. It turns out to be Allah. it would then would be that there would, if people knew that, if it were true, if everybody's postmark is the same on all important mail, then there would not even be, back to what I was talking about the second guy that tried to counter in that triple play concerning conspiracies and being alive and hobbies. If it didn't appear that you could take up different hobbies and go in different directions, then why would men play? If it only appeared that you had one rat hole to run to, only one base, only one hobby, whatever it was, religion, that you got your choice. You can kind of hang around, eat, make rude noises, sleep, play around with games, and maybe be religious. And say that's about as much secondary as you do. That you can do that, or you could be artistic, or you could try to be a scientist. And if it turned out that, or if you realized to begin with that it didn't matter, when it got into the secondary, when it got into the world of facts, it didn't matter what you pursued because it's all the same thing. May I suggest to you, just think about it. It's not a theory, as strange as it sounds, but think, would you take up, if you as an ordinary person, reasonable, intelligent person, would you take up pursuit of anything in the secondary world if you knew that it amounted to the same thing as everybody else's hobby that might have looked to be discreetly different? Now, you might if you were really passionate about it, but think about the ordinary level. You cannot hardly do an ordinary hobby if you're an ordinary person without some sort of audience. And if it turned out that you were pursuing the same hobby as everybody else, that you knew it, they may not know it, but you knew, well, what I'm doing, I'm going to write the world's great symphony, and the payoff is going to be the same thing as making up the world's great plea for a love offering for a faith healer. It's going to be the same thing as coming up with the greatest odds line on the Super Bowl next year. That no matter what you do, and I'm not going to try to describe what the payoff is, but the fun, the pleasure along the way, any secondary hobby is the same as every other secondary hobby. Can I suggest to you, it's a secondary world. We don't have to be real crude and say fall apart, although it would, but how about just would become real bland real quickly. It just kind of level out, and there wouldn't be much enthusiasm going on in the secondary world. And the secondary world would kind of go, does it make any more sense now? Don't answer. Don't answer. The postmark on everybody's really important mail is all the same. But if it is, who wants to know it? And of course, it's not that that's some sort of challenge, because nobody wants to know it, because if it were true, they don't need to know it. I just pointed out, it would be somewhere between disheartening and pathological or fatal. I knew I'd think of something real harsh to say. Is there anything worse than fatal? Of course, yes, but people watching TV probably don't think so. Run out of drugs. How about that? That's worse. Or your cable service cut you off right in the middle of some important show, an R-rated flick. Oh, that'd give them more for their money. And Kyrut advised some of the kiddies, is the way it was put here, when you're the first to leave the room, you can be the one to close the door. I am awfully tempted, I bet you agree. I say I feel like I'm speaking for all of us. I bet we're all seriously tempted to think that that has a metaphorical level to it somewhere. You want me to do it for you? If you stick around for conversations in life, and I don't mean just specific, but if you stick around with the collective wisdom of life, and by sticking around with it, all of you regular viewers know, it doesn't mean you have to agree with it. All you got to do is disagree with it, and you're sticking around with it. You're still dancing with the dollar with a hole in her head. I know it's stocking, but it's a hole in her head and yours if you're dancing with her. Because you can say, God, I hate dancing with you. You know, why to point out, well, you know, won't you quit dancing? Well, I hate her so bad I got to dance with her. You don't know how much I hate Republicans. Well, sure I do. You talk about it all the time. No. As long as you deal, as long as you're browning some bread, that is, you entertain You remember the one that opened tonight that no one asked for, which is fine, that was a holdover from last week, a piece of it, or last show, that a toaster is not a toaster until it browns some bread. It can be plugged in, be shiny, ready to go, but it is not a toaster until it has worked. The first one tonight says that just as a toaster is not a toaster until it browns some bread, a man is not an ordinary man until he has accepted, till he has entertained some ordinary thoughts. If you are dealing with the collective wisdom of humanity, where it is, you're religious, you're anti-religious. You're nationalistic, you're anti-nationalistic. You're in favor of up, or you're violently opposed to up. It doesn't matter what. As long as you are entertaining, as long as you're playing around with the bread of the city, then you cannot leave the room. But if you go ahead and leave the room, you can close the door, because you've changed the nature of the game. It's not that you teach them a lesson. I know some of you people out there taking cheap drugs and watching this and may think, well, this is a way to get even with my mama, or all those people uptown that got better jobs and haircuts than me. Drug that. Just a joke. It's not a way to get even. It's a way to get loose. Because if you're the first to leave the room, but see, if you're the first to leave the room, nobody knows it. Because they don't know what leaving the room is. You're just gone. But if you're the first to leave the room, you can close the door. But if you try to leave the room and you're with everybody else, like you're in the room and they're all saying, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to be in favor of building a brand new church, or we're going to be in favor of collecting the pinstripe party. And you say, listen, I'm intelligent. I'm getting too smart for that. Screw you people. You're idiots. I'm going to leave here. You can try to leave here, but if you leave, you're going to go by whatever door they choose. And when I say they, I'm talking about life. You end up being just a pissed off, automatic naysayer. You are, even though Kyrut and I have been using the terms rebel and revolutionist, we didn't make it up. You're just some kind of low-class, run-of-the-mill rebel in the city. You're just a critic. You're just a smart-ass. Somebody throwing the Molotov cocktails at the barricades, trying to catch the president in his office and lock him in. You're still playing their game. You cannot close the door if you apparently get out of the room. You're going to go through the door they say. No matter what you believe, you're going out the door they say. Is why it's never any satisfaction, to do that to the ordinary world. Because you can do it. But they let you do it. Remember when I say they, it's not people. Life lets you do it. But all you're doing is saying that to something that you're still dancing with. Kyrut points out, which I don't, well, you did. You're the one that said it. There was probably a metaphorical level here. When you're the first to leave the room, you can choose which door to close. You can be the one. You can close it after yourself. And there's 2 or 3 reasons, one of them I just mentioned in passing, is they don't really notice you've gone. Because as long as you're not struggling with them, they don't notice whether you go or not. But if you struggle with them and try to leave, they know when you go. Because you leave backing away from them. And you have to feel around for a knob. I'm sure this is metaphorical, even though I'm doing a piece of physical business. You have to feel around, and any knob you find is some knob that they got there. That isn't life put it there. And it can be a door that says anti-whatever they're doing. And you can think, boy, I'll teach them a lesson. You got to think about it. They put up the door. When I say they, the same people, life, the place where the postmark is that you don't want to think about, they're the ones that made the people in the room say, all right, we're in favor of this. And then you find a door that says, I'm in favor of not this. And you think, all right, you guys, get away from me, I'm getting out of here. And you find the door. That's why when you rebel at that kind of level and leave, as anyone with any sense knows, any possibility knows, that level of rebellion, you get away from it, and after you're going and all that to everybody, parents, priests, rabbis, society, and you get away by yourself and you find out, you do all this, you'll never take me alive, and you run, you find out, not only do they not take you alive, nobody even chases you. And still you keep trying to peek back over the hill hollering, remember, I still said, and by then, if you've been gone 5 minutes, they forgot about it. But you say, well, at least I showed them. And for some reason, you go away, metaphorically, intellectually, even after doing all this, give them the finger, It's like you want to go wipe your tongue off or your finger, and it's got nothing to do with morality. It simply has to do with the fact that it was unprofitable. You tried to do something, and that didn't succeed. That's because you didn't get to close the door that you chose. Reread it with the appendage. And Carrick said, when you're the first to leave the room, you can be the one to close the door. And at the bottom, parentheses sort of, granted that this info is not of any value to those still huddled in the herd. Because if you're huddled in the herd, you're not going anywhere. Whether you're there saying, God, I love it in the herd, or if you're so sharp you say, boy, I hate being here in the herd. Boy, what a guy. The city loves a good company cow. But it also, in a sense, there was a Kairoot sort of pointed this out a few nights ago. In a sense, it has an even kind of little particular love for little company cows that go, like life doesn't know it when it's out there, riding the range and it turns its back and it knows. I mean, the big cowpuncher life, it can turn its back and it knows that there are little cows that go. And in a sense, life has a particular little affection because he knows that they are really company cows. The kind of company cows that just kind of hang around and they eat and do whatever's required, which is the majority. That's kind of the middle class. In a sense, life's never too sure because they can wander off and they don't really cause much fuss. But the little ones that go, life knows, got them by the short hairs. Got them by their little heifer parts. Whenever he felt like really roughing it, on number 5 nights, this one God, when he was really roughing it, would only turn up his blanket to number 4. And here at the bottom it says, maybe you shouldn't laugh. Maybe you're part of his blanket. Would anybody like to think about that? Even away from the fact of metaphysical God, how about you could start out yourself? Not metaphysical, metaphorical. You could start out, and this apparently been about people. That you say, well, when a guy, and this one guy really wanted to rough it, and on those cold kind of nights, on a night that was medium cold, he would only turn his electric blanket up to low. Consider it life requiring one thing, and guys thinking, hey, I've been around. I'm no pansy in the intellectual world. And what do they call roughing it? It's a night calling for, let's say, a number 5 degree of stupidity. Maybe I go, all right, number 4. Come on, take your best shot. You like it another way? It's like the big cowpuncher comes by you. You got a rope or a little whip. Maybe he's hitting a few of the heifers and the cows around it. And you figure, here he comes, he's coming after me. And I could run for it, real fast. And he gets close and you just kind of saunter off. That's your roughing it. But in here, notice that maybe you shouldn't laugh because you might be part of his blanket. Back to the way I changed the metaphor, the picture, you're damn sure part of his herd. You can be out there with all of them, and him hollering, all right, little dogies, get along. And they all start getting along, and you're right in the middle of all the billions, the trillions, and you think, I ain't getting along. Because you could even be so jammed up that you don't even move. That your little legs don't even move. But hey, you may be part of the blanket. That's all right. If you're there in the middle of the herd and the herd moves, I think you know the rest, don't you? You can stand there stiff-legged, all 4 legs. And there's just every chance in the world that the herd goes and we look and we could really spot you. There you go. But you can be going, not me. Intellectually roughing it. Laugh told me to get along, little doggy, and I didn't get along. Well, yeah, I didn't participate. I mean, they may have pushed me along, but it's just because I couldn't get out the door of my own. Yeah. Woo. 60 seconds. And Carrick said on his otherwise blank head, one man wore a thought toupee. I'm glad time's running out and I don't have to deal with that one. Well, here's one that we should have dealt with, but I guess also I'm glad we only got 35 seconds. And Kyrut said, in a kind of a secret, super duper secret message to somebody, the real revolution has always hidden and protected itself by spawning spores of little pseudo-revolutions that always make themselves out to be a lot more than they actually are. Nobody wants to think about that? What's a great way to camouflage yourself? If you were a little doggy and you get away from the herd, and you don't want to be caught, and you were some kind of little revolution, what if you could make up real quick some kind of little dollies, some kind of little spirit versions of you, the little doggy that's kind of getting away from the herd, and you'd send them all out, and you just went away and didn't say much. Just try to get over behind the cactus, behind the hill, and you fight these little fake ones, these little wind-up ones, and they come out and make all kinds of noise, and they're the ones that shake their fist at the big ranger. Huh? That doesn't sound familiar at all? You don't recognize man's institutions, religions? Boy, I'm sure sorry we're out of time. Good night.